Hey guys, welcome back to Gallery Hoppers. I hope you had a great summer. I'm just coming to you from the editing chair as we forgot to film an intro and outro for this video. Olivia's in New York right now, so we can't film it together. So I just thought I'd get on good old photo booth and film it like this. So in this week's episode, we interview Rabia, who is a recent OCAD graduate. So let's get into it. Welcome to Gallery Hoppers.
It's great to be here, finally.
Okay, so can you introduce yourself as an artist and give us an introduction to your practice?
Yeah, so my name's Rabia Sagir. I'm a Canadian Pakistani artist currently based in Toronto. And so about my practice, I'm an interdisciplinary artist. I work with traditional media as well as textiles and design-based work. So that's just an introduction.
Yeah, sounds amazing. So this past year we were in thesis together at OCAD, and so can you talk a little bit about your thesis work, Lahore, and the characters and significance behind the work?
So the way that the concept came to be was I was really focused on the idea of storytelling on fabric. I didn't know what I was going to do when I went into thesis, so my first half of thesis was just material research. I worked with a lot of fabrics, different ways of painting and printing on fabrics. And then the concept came from, it was a combination of culture and tradition, but also memory and dreamscape. I was really interested in the idea of combining all these elements together. And that was basically the concept of it. Okay, so I was working with digital print and I had done a lot of experimentation here in like Toronto, but that was not working out because of the color payoff on fabric. I wanted to work with layering as well, so my choice of fabric after all my experimentation was organza. So then what happened was I had to get everything printed back home in Pakistan. So that was a big element of how I had to like factor in my deadlines and like my timeline in general. With the composition of the paintings, so there were 6 paintings in total. The entire thesis was 12 pieces. There were 6 paintings. They were watercolor and color pencil. And the fabric works were organza and the back was a hand dyed and hand painted Bamberg. So I wanted that double layer aspect of it. The paintings themselves, the concept was looking at growth in a cyclical perspective. So it was broken down into 6 pieces, and the first piece essentially looked at this idea of the innocent stage of your growth, and it explored like memory and also this predatory cycle of how you have to sort of kill parts of yourselves in order for other parts to survive. That was the entire like idea of the thesis. So the animal, I forgot I used animal symbolism.
It's okay.
Yeah, so I chose to use animal symbolism over just painting humans. I thought it was more universal and then I could embed a lot of meaning behind those animals. And I gave them, so some of the characters had human traits as well because I wanted it to be like people you've actually seen. So they were embodying humans, but again, I wanted the idea of it to be universal, even though it was coming from my culture. Especially considering the audience I was going to be displayed to. I think that was a big thing I had to consider as well.
Sure.
Okay, so for the animal symbolism, there were more than 5 characters, but over here I made like 5 characters for the business cards. They were meant to depict human traits and like I wanted them to be morphed as well. So for example, like going back into things that were important to me or stories that I had heard. For example, the story of the frog and the scorpion and how it was essentially self-sabotage because the frog trusted the scorpion and it's the scorpion's nature to sting, and midway they wanted to cross a pond or something. And the scorpion said that I take you, it got on the frog and it stung the frog midway, they both died, essentially. So this card sort of, or this animal represented self-sabotage. Then the main character that I used was the social climbing rat gang. So I think everywhere, like there are social climbers, but especially in Pakistan, I've just seen one too many. So I thought rats sort of symbolize that pretty well. Then there was the two-headed peacock, which was meant to represent people who were self-absorbed. So the idea of how the male peacocks sort of like know that they're beautiful, so they use their feathers as like a mating call. So essentially what I did was two peacocks were facing each other, that they were so self-absorbed that the only thing they could see is themselves, essentially. Then there was the donkey with the tiara, which is meant to represent bimbo energy. That's all I have to say for that. And then there's the chameleon, diplomatic chameleon. So the idea of how everyone's friend is not really your friend. So that's where these came from. There were a bunch of other ones as well. There was a wolf in sheepskin. So basically predator in plain sight. So people who wait for like, they're like there, they pretend to be your friend, but they aren't. So that's what that was representing. Then there was one which was a vulture with a pocket watch. So smart predators. So people who wait for their turn to attack you. That. And then there was a hippo with liposuction marks, which was people who are like image conscious, which is a big thing. So there was that. And those were all like they were throughout the series as well, but mainly in like the second painting, which was it was called A Game of Cat and Fish because it was set in a fish market. So the way the painting started, I was working on 2 paintings at a time, and I was looking at a bunch of resources for inspiration as well. So, but mainly my main like, I guess, resource bank was memories, like my own memories, what was important to me, but then also elements of like culture and tradition, and then weird animals that I had seen in my dreams. So like the element of dreamscape and bringing fantasy into it. So the first painting sort of started with this idea of innocence and how you enter the world with this false reality. You're so absorbed by your own little world that you don't really see what's around you. So you can, in like the painting, you can see there's like a snake, and like the chick is so unaware of its surroundings.
Yeah.
So that's where like the first painting is based. And then there's also a cat in the first painting hidden behind the fountain. So in the second painting, the cat's the main character. I should explain the fact that throughout the entire series, it's the same animal, it's just changing form.
Okay.
And then it just comes full circle, because then it goes into the idea of growth being full circle and like sort of breaking down those stages and how in the end you have to accept all parts of it in order to actually move on and for that cycle to be fruitful, I suppose. So in the second painting, it explores this idea of what was it? It was illusion. The second painting was illusion. It's set in a fish market, because when we were younger, there was a thing where if it was too chaotic, the professors would be like, oh, is this a fish market? So that you can hide a lot in a fish market. So I set it up as almost like a, you know, those games where you have to like look for things, like scavenger hunt, essentially. That's how I set the painting up. So there were a lot of clues that you had to look at to know where the chick actually went. Then the third painting represented self-sabotage, like the self-sabotage stage of your growth, and how the monkey's the main character in that, and the monkey essentially realizes that it fucked up and whatever it was told was not real, and that was the self-sabotage. Then I went into the fourth one, which is the anger and like denial stage, and like the internal conflict that you feel. So there are 2 main characters that are fighting each other, and then it's like they're surrounded by all the animals that are just staring, to sort of represent the people who just watch and like enjoy the show when you're going through like your own shit. And then it goes into the fifth one, which is it's called the Animal Kingdom's Game Theory. And in that, all the animals are playing a game of chance. So essentially, there's going to be one winner. So it's the bargaining stage of your growth cycle, where essentially what you have to do is you have to see which parts of you you're gonna let survive. And so all the animals, like the main characters, are playing a game with it, like with themselves, and one character is gonna win. Then the sixth one, they're all sitting together. They're having fruit, which was a big part of like my own life. My family, we would like sit together and like have fruit and then that's the acceptance stage, and then they're all the animals like sitting together, which essentially is like the most important stage, I would say. Not the most important, but it's like a very crucial part of your growth cycle, because you have to accept every single part of you that's existed up to the stage that you are right now. So yeah, that's how it comes full circle.
No, it's so detailed and well thought out.
I just
and
touched
so
upon
many
it,
different- yeah.
It's just way, like, for me, when I was like working on it, I really wanted to focus on meaning as well as material. I did not want to just leave it at like flat paintings, even though it could have just been left at that. But the reason why that I chose to like put it up on fabric was also that goes into like the idea of growth and how fabric sort of mimics human traits. If you puncture it, it like holds that memory, it like ripples, it absorbs, and all of that. So I really wanted to focus on material as well as concept, and I wanted them to work together.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, you did it. I mean, you did it. Yeah,
I did it.
Yeah, yeah. It came together really well, and that actually leads into a little bit of my next question, which was to talk about the experience of Grad X, the experience of presenting your work, graduation, and then about your life post-university as well.
Okay, so for Grad X for me was an interesting experience in general. I wasn't expecting, so the way my work came in, because all the printing was being done back home, I sort of got it a week before, I'd say, our finals.
So stressful.
I'm such a control freak when it comes to my work that it was, I think the entire experience in itself was so stressful because I could not just let someone else do my work, especially if I wasn't there to like oversee like what was gonna happen or what was happening. I hadn't seen what the color payoff was like gonna be until it actually came here. And that was interesting to say the least, but I think it turned out fine. It turned out pretty good. The response was really good. In terms of like presenting my work, I feel like when I was doing it, I just went into like business mode. It was the same thing that you had to repeat, and then you just had to market it properly. Because there were so many people coming in. It was actually a fun experience overall. Then what else? What was the next part?
What are you up to now that you've graduated, or what are your aspirations and goals?
Honestly, I'm just confused. This is the first time. I've always had like goals to work towards, but this is the first time in my life where I'm just like, what do I want though? At first, like, you know, like you can see, like for example, when I was working towards university, I was just like, you could see what the result is going to be, you know what you're working towards. But right now there's like no like dream job or like no, it's just not there. So I'm just trying to figure out what I want right now.
Yeah. It can be a really disorienting experience when you're so used to this like very particular structure of like what school is like, and you have this mindset because you're just so entrenched in it. But then once you get like released from that institution, you're like out in the world and you're like, okay, well I know I like art, but like what do I do now?
The weirdest part of it is that when we were like, even during thesis, they were like people coming in talking about like being for example a gallery artist or things like that, but when I would think about it, I was just like, I can't do this. Like this is not what I want, because I just don't produce work like that. I really have to immerse myself in my work, and then I sort of like working on one-off projects rather than like a continuous thing where I have to like work back to back. I can't do that.
Well, it's good that you know yourself in that way, at least. Like, I feel like even people that are just getting out of school right now don't even know how they like to work, you know, which is like honestly one of the first steps in figuring out like what you're gonna do. So it's good that you have that background.
But I also think it depends on like, now I realize maybe I should have just done a different degree, because I was so into the idea of just doing art, thinking that a more realistic degree, I would say. I think that's something that I realized after.
You know, I will say to that I love the studio aspects of drawing and painting, but there are times when I wonder if those studio aspects that I got from it could have been more self-directed and self-taught, and it would have been more practical to pursue like an arts admin or curatorial position or degree. That way I could still do what I'm essentially doing, which is working on art in my spare time and trying to break into certain galleries and the public art sector on my own time, while still having that degree that's going to give me another job that's going to sustain me. But you know, different things work for different people. So.
I couldn't see myself studying anything other than photography.
Really?
So
The weirdest part is, I agree with that. Like, even with me, I couldn't see myself studying anything else, especially with the information and like the access that I had before applying to university. But then once you're in it and once you're done, and then like you're just sort of thrown into this new world and you have to figure it out. It's just like, oh shit, maybe I should have just like done something more practical.
Yeah, or even just because like a lot of the jobs that I'm applying for right now are like arts admin jobs essentially, and not only are all graduating artists really applying for these jobs, but also graduating curators and graduating people who have arts admin degrees. So I'm going up against much more skilled workers in that sense for the same positions, you know? So,
yeah, that makes so much sense. I was applying to more graphic design jobs because I have all the skills except the UX UI stuff. But that's such a major part of their industry, and it's so competitive and like saturated that you can't even have just beginner experience to get into those industries.
Can you learn it yourself?
Yeah,
YouTube.
Yeah. That's the next step.
Yeah.
To sort of like learn those skills and like figure that out.
Okay.
Could you do a master's in curation?
Could I do a master's in curation?
Yeah, as your next step.
Yeah, but I do.
Thinking.
It's hard because I look back and I say all these things about wanting to be practical, but then also on the other hand, like my passion does lie in like studio art and like wanting to be an artist. So I don't know if I would want to do a master's in that, but maybe like a diploma program in like arts admin or something like that would be good.
Yeah, I feel like I've always been very like headstrong about what I want to do and what I want to do after and where I want to go, but I get stuck in that cycle because if I don't get there, then I'm like, oh no, I'm failing, because I have like goals that go on like 20 years from now. I know where I want to be, but I don't know how I'm going to do that, you know?
The funniest part is I used to think like that, especially before university. It was like, if I wanted something, I was going to get it.
Yeah.
And it's not that I didn't put the work in. I used to work really hard for everything that I had, but now I just feel like when I sit and like weigh the pros and cons of like manifesting that like so badly that like you don't see anything else, or maybe those things don't work out for you, I'm just like, maybe I shouldn't have like been so obsessed with like the end result of no, it has to be this.
I feel like we also got more we got more open to other ideas in the pandemic too, for some reason, and like more tired, just generally like tired of wanting this one thing because things got scary and so.
I think for me things also got confusing when I added my minor, because it was just like, oh, there's so many other things that you could possibly do, and then you're just like, oh, but then at the end of it my degree would say this, and then you have to have like the proper experience to enter any industry, so it was just confusing.
Totally. Okay, so this is my next question was gonna be, so you're talking about the graphic design work and wanting to break into graphic design. So my next question was, can you talk about managing different creative pursuits as an interdisciplinary arts worker? How do you work between projects? And you can talk about, I was looking over your website, so you can talk a little bit about your graphic design projects.
So for graphic design, it's not really something new that I've been doing. I used to work a lot with like brands working on like their packaging and just branding, like logo design and things like that. Recently I sort of did a whole revamp of my website. I hand drew like illustrations for it, so it's pretty much all hand drawn. They're hand drawn animations and all of that. So I was really focused on making my website really cohesive, to have especially because there's so many random things that I ended up doing over like 5 years, and I wanted it to be sort of like an online journal for everything that I've done. But everything's so different looking that I had to decide on one style to have it look cohesive. So I picked like a more illustrative style. I hand drew everything. It's like black and white. But yeah, that's what I was like working on. Other than that, I was doing a bunch of like logo design and things like that. I haven't really done any more, I guess, art-based work. Like for example, just like traditional drawing and painting. But yeah, that's what I've been up to.
Sounds good. Sounds great. Cass, your turn.
Yeah. So, in July, you had your first art show, Post-Grad X. Exciting. The show featured many of your thesis works, amongst other artists from In the Middle. Can you talk about how you became involved in the Middle? Or you were saying before, but just kind of reiterating that, and the purpose of In the Middle, and its purpose in representing Toronto-based artists of MENA descent, so Middle Eastern and North African descent.
So the way I got into that was, so one of the people who were like organizing the event were like an acquaintance from way before. They had seen one of my works that was in the feminist art exhibit in 2019, I want to say. Or like, I think it's 2020 actually. It's just one of the 2 years. And after that, they had been following my work. But in between, another thing that I had done was during quarantine, I did a project where I asked people to send in like portrait pictures of themselves, and I was practicing portrait like painting in watercolor because I hadn't in a really long time. And they had sent me an image of themselves, so they were part of that painting as well. And that painting was also exhibited somewhere. So that was another reason why. And then Grad X happened. They sort of came to the show. They saw the work. They really wanted it to be a part of the In the Middle exhibit that was going to happen like later on. So that's how they reached out to me, and that's how I was like a part of it. During the exhibition, I think it was such a nice way of just bringing that community together, because even though I think Grad X, it's so diverse, just having like specific work or like giving people the space to just have their work without any other, I don't know how to like explain it properly. The right words, I have to look for the right words for it. But for me personally, I think it really gave me a sense of community. And it was so supportive, which I felt like I didn't get during Grad X, especially within my own artistic community. And that really threw me off. So then right after Grad X, that was something that I really needed. And I think it just happened at the right time. And yeah.
Yeah, Grad X was very competitive too, right?
And I didn't think it would be, because for me, I've generally never been competitive, because that was just never a thing. I feel like if you compete with people, you always lose. You have to just be better than what you were before. So essentially, you have to compete with yourself. And that's how you will actually like move ahead in whatever goals you want. It's never about another person. And everybody's like trajectory of life is so different. So you can't really be comparing and like be competitive. But I also do understand that when your work is up like in the same room as like a bunch of people, how intimidating it can be, especially if you see how other people are receiving another person's work and maybe that's not happening to yours. So I can see why that happens, but it's not a good feeling.
Yeah. Since you showed some of your thesis works for the second time with In the Middle, do you feel like the work has shifted or gained new meaning being a part of the show? Has your understanding of the work changed since Grad X at all?
I honestly don't think so. So the way that I work is I put my all into one project. It's relevant to me for the duration of like when I'm working on it. After that, I don't think about it. After that, nothing changes. I rarely ever go back and revisit like an idea or a concept or even just a work. So I don't really think anything changed.
Yeah, it's just like a time capsule of that period of your life.
That's like a big thing with the way I work in general. I create work as like a response to whatever I'm feeling. It's always like it comes from a very personal space. So once I'm out of that, I don't go back to it.
Yeah.
It's just done.
Nice.
So it's like that.
Well, that was all of our questions.
Yay!
So, thank you so much for your time
Thank you for
and
having
interviewing
me.
with us. We really enjoyed learning about your work, and we look forward to seeing what you're up to in the future.
Thank you guys for watching. We hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time. Bye!